Avengers Infinity War is the most successful movie of all time, pretty much. And we've been talking a lot about this film since it came out, a few weeks ago. And one of the things I wanted to discuss, which I've been holding off on talking about because I wanted to get a special guest on to talk about it, is Thanos and Thanos' mission in the film, and how, in some ways, Thanos' goal really doesn't make a lot of sense and can actually probably be written differently to make more sense, or just changed altogether. Now, those of you who read the comics, you know that the Thanos in the comic books had a completely different mission than the one in the films. In the comic book, he was in love with Mistress Death, with Lady Death. And in the film, he wanted to wipe away half of existence because he wanted to balance the universe. But there's problems here. So we're going to go ahead and talk about it here in this video. And before I go any further, I want to say that first of all, this movie is going to have spoilers for Avengers Infinity War. If you have not seen the film, I don't know how you haven't seen it. It's literally been out for a month. It has been out for a month. Go see it. But let's talk about it here. And I also want to say that me and my guest really do like this movie. Like, I love this movie. So this video is not really dissing the movie or disrespecting the movie. It's just more so kind of questioning Thanos' character development. Not development, character motives. But remember, when dealing with a villain, they're not always right? So this kind of fits with that. So please welcome back to the channel. He's been here before. We talked about Doctor Strange. He's back now. It's Keith from Lifespan.io.
Excellent. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm...
No, I was going to say, last time you were on, you were Keith from the Retromancers, but Lifespan's a much bigger deal. Because here's the thing about Lifespan. Lifespan relates to Thanos.
That's right. So, what Danny's talking about is, I had a YouTube channel back in the day for retro gaming, Retromancers, which was fun. But since that time, I found a little bit of a stronger calling of basically trying to save everyone's lives from age-related disease. And that ties me to Thanos. I'm actually connected to Thanos in two ways. My quote-unquote day job is I work for the company that Disney actually acquired to build their new streaming service. So, I kind of work for Thanos in a way. And in this nonprofit work, Lifespan.io, we raise funds and awareness for research aimed at extending healthy human lifespan. And one of the misconceptions that we frequently encounter is this idea of, well, if people live longer and healthier, are we going to overpopulate and destroy the planet? And basically the whole idea that Thanos is basing his goal of balancing the scales on. So this is a topic, that I talk about all the time, and I'm definitely happy to engage with Thanos directly because I think he's way wrong.
Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about, because a lot of folks were saying, oh, Thanos has a point. Some parts of the universe in the Marvel Cinematic Universe may be overpopulated. Maybe there's not enough food to feed them. Maybe there's not enough resources on the planet to have a healthy living. So his idea was, if we wipe away half of life, then there's going to be more fruits and vegetables, more natural resources and things like that for people to live more comfortably. That was his idea. But of course, the problem with that is, well, there's actually a few problems. And one of them is, if you wipe away half of the universe, you're going to wipe away half of the workers as well. And we need people that have skill sets in different things to do things. I am pretty good at entertaining people. I'm not a farmer. I don't know about how to raise crops. Thanos wipes away half of them, I might starve for a bit. Not to mention that I thought that the whole concept of what he did is a little bit silly, because if you have control of all 6 Infinity Stones, you can just create more planets, create more resources, create more food. So even if you're worried about overpopulation, with the glove, you don't need it. And that to me was always kind of something that was a little bit dumb, to be honest with you. But what you're talking about is the actual myth of overpopulation in the real world, in our world, in comparison to the MCU.
Correct. So to kind of talk about this topic, you want to sort of split it into two different kind of categories. One is what you just said, is the idea of overpopulation being the root problem correct? And then kind of as a separate issue, which relates to kind of what you're talking about with the workers, is, okay, let's assume that is the problem. I don't think it is, but assume it is Thanos' solution even correct in that case? So let's talk about the first part, the idea of, is overpopulation this problem that Thanos thinks it is. And
actually, let me just start by saying this real quick before you go into your thing. With the work that you do at Lifespan, the goal, like you said, is to extend human lives, make people live longer, through technology and things like that, health, which everybody wants to live longer and at least healthier lives, not just like, stuck in a old folks home all day, unable to move, a good life. And I think like you probably have people, like the number one criticism that you've gotten is, well, if people live like to be 200, is that not going to overpopulate the earth? Like, are we not going to chew through our resources faster? And you're saying that there have been studies that tell you that no, even if we have people living an extra 100 years, it might not do that.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. There's a lot of reasons for it too. And the whole myth is actually interesting because it goes back to this 18th century priest cleric named Thomas Malthus, that his name gets thrown around a lot, so your listeners might have heard of him before. He wrote this essay, an essay on the principle of population, and he basically freaked everybody out, saying population is going to double every generation and food production's not going to match. We're going to blow through the carrying capacity of the earth and everyone's going to die. And this kind of gets picked up every 50, 100 years, and recycled again. Most recently, there was this book called The Population Bomb by Paul and Ann Ehrlich. And right in like the intro of it, it says, I believe, the battle to feed all of humanity is over. And at this late date, nothing can prevent the substantial increase in world death or something. So it's like super scary, right? And,
and this plot for an MCU movie. Oh wait,
yeah, exactly. And it's not just MCU. Like you can see it in pop culture too. Like Dan Brown's book, The Inferno. If anyone read that, like it was the same kind of premise. The villain wanted to release a plague to check the human population. Even in A Christmas Carol, Ebenezer Scrooge, before he has his epiphany at the end, like he says something like that. Oh, the poor people need to die because they're surplus population or whatever. But to answer your question. It turns out that just the data, it didn't happen, So there was exponential growth as countries develop, and in the developing world there still is, growth that's going up. But in developed countries, like us, the EU, the population is actually leveling off, and in some cases even crashing. Like if you look at Japan, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of the Gray Tsunami, but it's this phenomenon that's happening where the birth rates are really low. And the baby boomers are all getting older, so there's more like adult diapers being sold than baby diapers. And the population's starting to level off and is going to begin to crash. And that's going to slowly start to happen to the developed world because of just a lot of issues. People, a better contraception is like a huge one. Women being educated. Another one that people don't think about is if you live longer and, to your point, healthier, you're younger longer, women also tend to delay when they have children. So it actually slows the birth rate. It's really counterintuitive. But it turns out that this fear that Thanos has, it doesn't get borne out by what's actually happening in the world.
Yeah, so what you're saying is in another world where maybe Lifespan, your company or somebody comes around and extends our human life, we would not be the biological time clock of a woman over time, because this has to take some time to get used to, obviously. Over time, with evolution or with evolutionary psychology, they wouldn't be in a rush to have a baby before they hit 30. They would maybe in some ways wait till they're 50. If they're going to have healthy ovaries and healthy bodies and they're going to live to be 300, that's what you're saying, that it would actually in some way slow down the birth rate.
Right, and the good thing to note here is that it's not even speculation. Like, this has been what has happened. The conception, first conception date or whatever, has scaled back as lifespan has increased. So, it's not just predicting it wildly. It's based on what has already happened. This is what is expected to happen. So it's rooted in actual data that already exists. That makes sense.
What about the limited amount of fossil fuels and things like that? What about that being part of Thanos' concern?
Now that's where you get into more of a legitimate issue, right? So,
but that being said, I just want to say in the MCU, we've got Spider-Man, Ant-Man, everybody's a scientist. So I feel like, for some reason, in the MCU, I don't think fossil fuels and like coal and stuff like that is that big of a deal with the kind of tech. When we saw Iron Man with a nanotechnology armor, which probably got your flagpole at full salute when you saw that in the movie theater, with how much you love nanotech. I'm over here like, oh, Keith is loving this scene of the movie. You know what I mean? Like I just feel like in that world, I feel like that wouldn't even be a real issue at all.
Yeah, I think you're right, but in some sense, the Marvel Universe is almost sort of kind of trying to address these issues. Like in the Black Panther movie, I believe some channels have actually talked about this, but how Wakanda is sort of like a good example of this problem, because in the real world, to your earlier point, like resource allocation, it is a big problem. Like there are people who are dying of starvation. You know, there is a resource problem on the earth, but it's a problem of policy, not population. And a good example is Venezuela right now, where the country was super rich because of all, you know, its oil holdings for a while, but that wealth doesn't translate to the people because it's like a command and control sort of dictatorship, right? So the phrase that I always think of in this case is, I'm not sure if you ever read Neuromancer, if your listeners haven't read this book.
Retromancer, maybe.
Neuromancer was this book that basically, it started the internet. It coined the phrase cyberspace by William Gibson. It's one of those books that when you read it, you see how like every movie has ripped off something, like The Matrix, Ghost in the Shell, you know, all that stuff comes from
You're too smart for my audience.
But there's a phrase there that he says, which is totally applicable here. It says something like this: the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. So it's that we have the technology, to your point, not even just in the Marvel Universe, in the real world. We have the technology to solve these problems. It's just all about, are we actually using them? Are we distributing the boon of our gifts of technology? Yeah.
It's crazy because with the way that hard drives have evolved, you know, with now we have, you know, solid state drives that are tiny, but they hold, you know, terabytes of data. And it's getting better and better. I mean, when I was a kid, I kept hearing about solar power. And everyone's like, oh, man, you know, one day we're not going to even need, you know, anything but hydroelectric and solar because it's all like Earth's resources and, you know, solar power is endless. And now here we are in 2018. I don't even see that much solar power anywhere. Like, it's like, what's going on here? You know, it's weird.
Well, again, you know, not to get too political, but, you know, those are policy, you know, deals. You know, some fossil fuel companies don't want that, you know, so right now they still have a stranglehold on the politics, so they can make it not as lucrative for people to invest or build out solar companies. And, you know, we'll have to get there eventually because, you know, fossil fuels are finite, right? So at some point we're going to have to switch over to things like solar. But I think
I don't see why we haven't already. You know what I mean?
Well, you know, I guess we just have to become, you know, the president, one of us. So let's go ahead and do that.
I don't even know if he even has the power at this point. The corporations are in control, brother.
Yeah. Absolutely. But I think this is actually a good place to pivot into why Thanos' solution is stupid. Because, as you were mentioning earlier, if you had the Infinity Gauntlet and you had all this power, like, instead of just killing half the people on the Earth... I think we just dropped you, so...
I dropped for like a second. Keep going.
Okay. So I'll rewind to that. Yeah.
No, don't rewind. Keep recording.
Okay. No, I mean, what I'm going to say. Anyway, all right, pick me up right now.
I'm still recording. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. So yeah, this is a good point to kind of pivot into why Thanos' solution is stupid. Because if he had the Infinity Gauntlet, there's so many better ways to address that problem, even if it was true, without killing half the people in the universe randomly. One is obviously just directly solve the problem, you know, create more planets, more food, whatever. But even if that was somehow off the table, you know, limited, you know, the gauntlet can't quite eke that out.
Even though it can because of the power of the gods, but whatever.
I hear you, brother. But let's just say for whatever, you know, because that's obvious, right? Like, why doesn't he just do the thing directly? So let's assume there's some reason why he can't. Okay, fine. So then, as sort of like a step removed, it's not great, but a better way to do it would be, all right, let's like sterilize half the people or something. So, okay, we reduce the population without traumatizing the hell out of everyone, because his goal is supposed to make everyone happy and peaceful, right? I don't think wiping out half of your friends and loved ones is a great way to do that.
Right.
I guess he has not seen the show The Leftovers, if anyone has seen
or
that show.
or Left Behind. Left Behind.
There you go.
Right?
That doesn't work out so well. At least those shows seem to indicate. And another one let's get a little bit more technical here. Have you ever heard of a Dyson sphere?
That when I go to Vegas and go broke? That's all I can think of.
I guess it could be. So what I'm talking about here is a little bit different. It's this idea of like what a future, a much more developed version of the human race in 1,000 years could potentially do. It's a way of harnessing the energy of a star by think of it just by like building like a bunch of like a ring
building
of
a giant axe.
well, I'm gonna get there.
Right.
So a Dyson sphere is basically like building like a generator around the star to like collect all the solar energy, right? Like massive amount of free quote unquote energy. So I forget how to pronounce it, but the forge that, to your point, that Thor goes to, was it Nidavellir or something like that forge where he makes the axe. It kind of looks like a Dyson sphere or a partial Dyson sphere. It's these rings that are going around the collapsed star or whatever the hell they said. So it's like Thanos has been there. He's seen this. So he could just, make Dyson spheres around the stars and give infinite energy for everybody in the universe.
I mean, if they used all that energy to create an axe that could possibly nullify the Infinity Gauntlet, which, by the way, was not in the comics, why the hell couldn't they use that energy to, like you said, create factories or power things? Like, yeah, in some ways that plot point does fall apart. The movie, I think, is still well written, but I think that one plot point... But you could always say that Thanos just didn't know.
I guess, but that's why I made the qualification, is that from Peter Dinklage, we know that Thanos has been to that forge, so like
yes.
he would have seen it.
I know, but I'm saying he probably didn't think like maybe I could use this for a different reason than just being crazy.
I thought Thanos was supposed to be like crazy intelligent, right?
Not in the movie. I guess not in the movie. I don't know. I didn't write the fucking thing.
I highly critique Thanos' choice of the snapping. There was better snappings that he could have went with. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Yeah. No. It just. But the big one to me is just. I mean, we don't really. It's not really about how they're gonna fix it. It's just more so like. He did it. He won. That was a cool cliffhanger. It was a fun movie. But maybe he should go to lifespan.io and read up on that and say, hey, there's other ways to do this without. And then what's dumb is when people were saying, oh, I can sympathize with him. Well, you're an idiot. You just killed a bunch of people.
Well, to be fair, again, I want to say I actually really love the movie, even with this beef that I have with Thanos, and I did think that he was like a very well fleshed out villain. Like I did feel for him. I thought it was great. So and even though his name is the Mad Titan, I don't think he was crazy. So I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that I actually think Thanos can be reasoned with. And who knows? That may be the way they quote unquote beat Thanos in the second movie. Maybe they just talk him down.
I thought you were gonna say they go to lifepath.io and that's how they beat him.
Well, not for nothing, not to overly self-plug, but on lifespan.io, lifespan.io/blog, if anyone wants to read, I should be having a piece about all of this stuff, like in more detail, coming out soon. I'm not sure when it's going to drop in relation to when this video is going to drop. But
good timing too with the movie and all. You'll get extra clicks from movie fans.
Yes, but that is the way that I end that piece. I say, if anyone sees Thanos, man, just point him in my direction. I got a cup of coffee ready for him, some charts. It'll be okay, buddy. I'll just tell him how it's going to go, and it's going to be all right, Thanos.
How could you kill your own daughter, bro?
Yeah, I mean, I felt for it, and I do think Thanos actually, again, obviously sympathy for the devil here, right? But what I liked is in the small moments is that he was sort of honorable in his way, right? Like he sort of lets Quill go in that one scene, because he kind of respected him for making the choice to kill Gamora, even though it was just like a bubble gun. Right. And he does sort of honor the deal by not killing Stark. So I thought, obviously he's a monster, right? But they did kind of make him a sort of honorable monster, and that it's a lot easier to. I think it makes the movie much better when you have a villain that you can sort of get behind in some regards, instead of just being this abstract, totally evil for evil's sake kind of deal.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I got behind him in theory of what he wanted to do, but his methods could have been a lot better. More thought out.
Absolutely, yeah. So, who knows? Maybe in Infinity War Part 2, or whatever they're going to call it, in that movie, Thanos will go to our website and read and chill out.
Let's hope the Russo brothers are willing to give you that kind of endorsement.
We're working on it. Maybe eventually I'll be able to use my Disney connection. we'll see.
You should, and then you can go in there and talk to them about the whole thing. They're just gonna look at you and be like, "Buddy, it's a movie." I know. So go ahead and plug whatever you want to plug for the people listening.
Sure, yeah, thanks. So, as mentioned, if anyone wants to read up on all the interesting research of how we could actually extend healthy human lifespan, and it's going to take some work, but it's looking good, you can go to lifespan.io/blog. And if anyone actually wants to help us more directly, you can go to lifespan.io/hero and be a hero yourself to fight Thanatos. That's the Greek god of death, of which Thanos gets his name from. So if you want to get into the trenches directly and be not just watch superheroes, but be a superhero, you can do that.
Or you could play God of War.
Oh, awesome game. That we can have a whole other conversation about that. I'm loving it so far.
Well, we still got to talk about Xenogears one day.
Oh, favorite game.
Right? I got to replay that game. It's been a long time.
Yes.
Anyways, folks, thank you, Keith, and we'll talk to y'all in the comments. Let us know what you think about Thanos' plot and if there was any better way to write him. I'm curious to see if you guys have any ideas. So, thanks, and we'll catch you down the road.